If you ever find yourself looking at a map of Northwestern America, you'll notice a province of Canada called British Columbia, which is a bit of an odd name, but on the other side of the very straight border you'll find American Columbia. Wrong! You'll actually find Washington. So why is there no American Columbia? Well, after Britain and America beat the hell out of each other in the War of 1812, Britain decided they wanted better relations with the New World because war was not good, and opted to resolve some border disputes. The existing border between the USA and British Canada in all of the land west of this lake, called Lake o' the Woods, had been based on the drainage basin of the Mississippi River, which would obviously change with the centuries and could cause problems. It was noted that this straight line, the 49th degree north of the equator, cut through both British and American territory and would be a lot easier to control than a drainage basin border. So in 1818, both sides agreed to swap territory, giving up their land on the other side of the 49th. However, this was based on the Louisiana Purchase land America had bought from France, and this bit was still all unclaimed. So Britain and America agreed to jointly control the land and allow both nations' citizens to live and work there. A few decades earlier, European explorers were searching for a river that connected the Pacific Ocean to the Hudson Bay, and by that, the Atlantic Ocean. An explorer named Robert Gray entered a river on the west coast while piloting a ship called the Columbia Rediviva, or Columbus Revived. Get it? Because I'm like Christopher Columbus sailing around on my big boat discovering stuff? He entered a river he thought would make the connection and charted it, and although it didn't connect, he named it after his ship, calling it Columbia River. So when British traders began operations in this unclaimed territory, they called it Columbia. The Treaty of 1818 doesn't actually give the region a name, but Americans favoured the usage of Oregon, which has a variety of origins I won't get into, while the British favoured their trader's name of Columbia. People from both countries began to live and work in the area, and the increasing development and value of the territory began to cause friction. In the 1844 presidential election, many Americans made it clear that it was a big issue to them. Candidate James Polk of the Democrats was like, "The whole thing belongs to us." And candidate Henry Clay of the Whigs was like,
"Do with more border patrol and more asylum officers."
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence.
And James Polk very handily won the election. Now, when this happened, the British prepared for war because they thought Polk would invade to take the land. But Polk was doing this little thing called blatantly lying to win the election and scare your enemies. He didn't actually want war. The British had for a while been planning to end the dispute by dividing the land along the Columbia River, mainly because they really wanted Vancouver Island. So Polk, who now had them a little bit scared, was like, "How about we just split it along the already existing 49th parallel and call it even? We'll even let you keep Vancouver." And the British were like, "Yippee!" and signed the Treaty of 1846. So now the border was set, and the British naturally called their half of the land British Columbia because it was the part of Columbia owned by the British. The Americans called theirs the Oregon Territory. All well and good. But years later, when Americans began creating states out of this territory, they split it up. The most developed part was split off and retained the name Oregon, becoming a state 6 years later. When the split happened in 1853, this bit was going to be called the Columbia Territory, with the expectation that it would become the state of Columbia. It makes sense, right? British Columbia on one side, American Columbia on the other. However, this one guy, literally one guy, Richard Stanton, a Democrat from Kentucky, was not happy with this name. This guy was originally from this part of the country, which you may recognize as Washington, D.C. Stanton was quick to point out that actually, legally, it's not called Washington, it's only called the District of Columbia. Which is correct, Washington DC is a slang term. The area is called the District of Columbia and Washington refers to the city. But Stanton said that people would confuse Columbia with the District of Columbia and instead it should be named in honor of the first president, George Washington. In other words, Stanton said the state of Columbia should actually be called the state of Washington because people will confuse Columbia with Washington DC. And for some reason everybody agreed. This one guy was able to convince all of Congress that it was better to have Washington and Washington DC than Columbia and Washington DC. And President Alec Baldwin was like, "Yes, that sounds great," and signed that into law. So now we have a British Columbia on one side without its American counterpart on the other. Okay, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you learned a lot in this one.